We will now talk about cooperative security, which is a new concept. We know about collective security or collective defense system in world politics, but cooperative security is, as I said, it is a new concept. The term has become a popular catchphrase since the end of the Cold War. It has been generally used to describe a more peaceful but rather idealistic approach to security through increased international harmony and cooperation. Richard Cohen believes that NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO is currently the best example of cooperative security. First, we need to know what is cooperative security. Unlike collective security, where the security concern of a single nation becomes the security concern of all, here it is a bit different. In that sense, cooperative security operates beyond, say, a certain limit or beyond a certain organization. If collective security belonged to the League of Nations, to the United Nations system, cooperative security may also include non-members. That means the security of a particular area or of a particular region becomes the security concern of all. I give examples. Suppose outside NATO, if there is any security concern, NATO would also involve in that area. That means if any nation remains outside the NATO system, say if any East European nation remains outside the NATO system, but if there is any security concern in that particular area, NATO may involve itself in that security problem, in that security dilemma. So cooperative security is also outward, in the sense that it does not only confine itself to member states, to the limits of the organization. It also goes outward. In that sense, collective security was inward. It was an inward concept, but cooperative security is an outward concept. So, as I said, cooperative security means the security concern of the globe. First, it may start with a particular region, say Europe, say Asia, but it becomes the security concern. It may become the security concern of the whole world. Now, Richard Cohen, who is one of the leading exponents of cooperative security, along with Michael Mihalka, Cohen believes that in cooperative security, there are 4 rings of security. 4 rings of security. These 4 rings are individual, collective security, collective defense, and promoting stability. I repeat, first is individual, second is collective security, third is collective defense, and fourth is promoting stability. Now, the individual security is the inner core. It starts with human security. Every human being is concerned about his or her own security, and every nation must provide him with that security. That is why we know that concepts like human rights, concepts like human security, they are very important, and human rights must be protected to safeguard individual security. And Cohen believes that human security, human rights, in order to protect human security or human rights, countries must share liberal democratic values. Now, the cooperative security system must be proactive. That means collective diplomatic, economic, and if necessary, military action in areas outside their common space. This leads to promoting stability. That means in a cooperative security system, collective diplomatic efforts, collective economic efforts, and when it is necessary, military action, collective military action in areas outside the organization or in areas outside the common space is necessary. This leads to stability in the world, which Cohen calls promoting stability. So I explained the inner core, individual security, and the outer ring, promoting stability. But there are two more rings, the collective security and collective defense. Collective security means that it is, as I said, the security concern of one nation is the security concern of all within an organization. So it is inward looking. Collective defense system, the third ring, it is actually the defense or the defense organizations like say Warsaw Pact, like the NATO. They were mostly inward but sometimes outward. In case of NATO later on developed a system of going beyond the organization. But as far as Warsaw Pact was concerned, which typically involved the East European nations, Warsaw Pact was very much inward. It never went beyond the organization. So collective defense is also the defense of one single nation, is the collective responsibility of all others, but within the organization. Here, cooperative security is different. It is both inward and outward. I will give concrete examples. NATO, when it understood, according to Richard Cohen, that the problems in Bosnia-Herzegovina was going out of control. So NATO intervened in Bosnia. NATO intervened in Bosnia-Herzegovina in order to maintain security and peace in the European continent. So it was, although we know that NATO was mainly formed with West European nations, but after the Cold War, when problems erupted in other areas, in different parts of Europe, NATO did not only confine itself to the western part. NATO also went beyond the organization to intervene in Eastern Europe. And according to Michael Mihalka, he believes that ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN is another example of cooperative security, although according to Mihalka, ASEAN comprises of nations which fall into different categories: liberal democratic, authoritarian, sometimes non-democratic countries. But ASEAN, through its economic efforts, here Mihalka wants to give the economic example. Through collective economic efforts, ASEAN has become a very successful organization in terms of cooperative security, and now ASEAN has gone beyond its own organization. ASEAN has gone worldwide to establish economic relations with all major areas of the world, with Europe, with other Asian countries, with America, with Russia, with Africa. So collective economic cooperation, according to Mihalka, put ASEAN as a leading example of cooperative security. In this context, we must remember that security of whether of an individual or of a nation, security is not guaranteed always through military security. Security of an individual and of a nation can also be guaranteed through economic and through diplomatic efforts. So ASEAN is a leading example of how cooperative security could be achieved through economic efforts, according to Michael Mihalka. Therefore, cooperative security, which has become very popular after the Cold War, cooperative security does not limit itself to only military security. And we must know some of the leading exponents of cooperative security. Scholars like Ashton Carter, William Perry, and John Steinbarner, they spoke extensively about cooperative security for maintaining world peace. Now, what actually is cooperative security? Now, if we want to give a definition of cooperative security, how would we define cooperative security? We take one definition from Gareth Evans. He was also the foreign minister of Australia at one point of time. He said that cooperative security means it actually leads to connote consultation rather than confrontation, reassurance rather than deterrence, transparency rather than secrecy, prevention rather than correction, and interdependence rather than unilateralism. So, according to Gareth Evans, liberal idealistic view of the future of world security could best guarantee cooperative security. Mihalka believes that sustained efforts to reduce the risk of war that are not directed against a specific state or coalition of states is cooperative security. So, cooperative security is not that much of military efforts, although at the extreme point military action may be necessary. But cooperative security starts with diplomatic consultations, it starts with economic cooperation, and as we know, today the catchphrase is economic diplomacy. After the Cold War, after the end of the Cold War, now nations are no longer confronting one another militarily, or they are not trying to confront one another militarily. Rather, they are trying to cooperate more on the economic side. That is why more and more FTA, that is free trade agreement, are being created. Trade relations are given importance, trade and commercial relations. So cooperative security encompasses all these areas. Rather than thinking unilaterally, rather than believing that security means only military security. Gone are those days when a nation's security only meant military security. Security in terms of maintaining its territorial integrity. Territorial integrity is important, but nowadays if a nation is economically weak, that nation is also weak in terms of its own security. So, if a nation is poor, if a nation is economically weak, then we cannot say that only military, only its defense strength can ensure its security. So, cooperative security is a concern that is a global concern. One may say that collective security was also a global concern, but collective security was tested during a few wars, and it was not very successful. That is why people nowadays talk about cooperative security, which a major component of cooperative security is economic security. Through increasing trade and commerce globally, all nations may have a real sense of security. So we may attach it to the concept of globalization from an economic point of view. Globalization believes that through increasing trade and commerce, through increasing economic activities, all nations of the world can live peacefully. Cooperative security is one component of globalization. Here it is believed that if security is determined through other factors than military is not discarded, military security is not discarded, let me emphasize, but military security is not the only form of security. Economic security must be guaranteed to all nations. That is one important aspect of cooperative security. So, my concern becomes a global concern. The concern of a single nation becomes a global concern. That is important. And that when we talk about cooperative security, we must remember that empowering every nation through economic cooperation is an important part of cooperative security. So we may sum up by saying that unlike traditional notions of security, like collective security, which was mainly military security, cooperative security is more broader in its nature. The concept is more broader. It is not only military security, it is diplomatic, economic, and scientific and technological cooperation. So through all these, through economic cooperation, through cultural cooperation, through scientific, technological cooperation, the security concern of one single nation and the security of the world could be maintained. In simple words, if nations cooperate more on the basis of on economic basis, on science and technological areas, on cultural areas, the world would live in peace. So, not only through military cooperation, through other areas of cooperation, which we call soft areas. If military is a hard area of cooperation, the soft areas of cooperation, say cultural cooperation, scientific, technological cooperation, through these cooperation, the world can be secured, the world can live more peacefully. That is why cooperative security has gained tremendous popularity. It has gained momentum after the end of the Cold War, specifically from 1992 onwards, and it is very much a popular concept today. When cooperative security talks about sustained efforts to reduce the risk of war, it's the inner kernel of cooperative security comes out. Now, what are these sustained efforts to reduce war? How wars could be reduced in modern times? through diplomacy, of course, through negotiation, through consultation, even through backdoor channels. So these are the efforts, but one most important effort to reduce the risk of war, according to Mihalka, is economic efforts. Now let us give more and more examples. There are many scholars in world politics who believe that through economic cooperation, countries could reduce their political differences. Now let me give one concrete example. During the Cold War period, India and USA, they were not very much close. In fact, they shared an estranged relationship during the Cold War period. I'm talking of the period from 1945 to 1990. India and USA were not very close during this period. They shared mutual mistrust because they did not develop closer economic cooperation between themselves. Now, after the Cold War, if you look at statistics, the trade relations between India and USA went up significantly after the Cold War. That reduced political differences between India and USA, and they became very close. Now they share an engaged relationship. Earlier, they used to share an estranged relationship. Now, from this example from a micro level, we move to a macro level. If two countries can improve their relation through economic cooperation, globally it is possible to reduce political differences, to reduce the risk of war through economic cooperation. That is why Richard Cohen and Mihalka, they put so much emphasis on ASEAN, which is an economic organization and which has become successful. Following the example of ASEAN, the African Union has adopted the same economic cooperative measures. So cooperative security talks about reduction of the chances of war. Now, how the reduction of chances of war would be achieved? One solution is through economy, and specifically in the era of globalization, there is much scope for economic cooperation. After the end of the Cold War, when globalization has taken root worldwide, when it has become really a global phenomenon, the chances of economic cooperation are more. Unlike the Cold War period, when due to superpower rivalry, the world was divided into two distinctly opposite blocks. So chances of economic cooperation between these two distinctly opposing blocks were minimum. Now, when the Cold War has ended, when chances of economic cooperation has brightened, all nations should take an initiative to cooperate economically. And that is why all organizations, the European Union, the NATO, they have moved beyond their limited organizational structure. Earlier, it was impossible to think of NATO without only Western European countries, or European Union only through Western European countries. I mean to say that they typically belong to Western European nations. Now, European Union, NATO, they are moving eastward. They have embraced countries from the former socialist bloc. And one reason for this outward movement is, of course, economic cooperation, to increase trade and commercial relations. That would benefit all the nations. That is the thought behind expanding NATO or European Union. So, chances of reduction of war could be achieved through economic cooperation. So, cooperative security is not only military security, it is economic security, it is security from poverty, it is security from indignity. That is, dignity of human beings, dignity of nations is very important in this concept.